Hello everyone and welcome to your third C++ Programming for Beginners tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed the first two tutorials, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about something called conditional statements. And that might sound scary, but really it's really simple. Don't try to make it too complicated because it's really just English, and you'll see what I mean in a second, but there's a few different types of conditional statements, and we're going to talk about the most basic type today called if-else statements. And what this is just saying, if some condition holds true, then we'll execute some block of code that we denote, and if the statement is not true, then we'll do something else. So if something's true, we'll do this, else do this. And that's exactly how we write it as well. So I'm just going to give a demonstration here. I have declared a variable of type integer and set it equal to 50. If this doesn't make sense to you, I recommend you go back to the previous tutorial and review variables, but this should make sense to you. Shouldn't be anything new. So now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to write the code and then explain it. If x equals 50, this double equal sign is not a mistake, by the way. I'll explain that in 1 second. And then we open, close curly braces. And I want to talk about curly braces for a second because it really comes into play here. Curly braces denote a block of code. And what a block of code is just what it sounds like. We give a block of code to some statement, and it only gets executed if whatever statement it's in is true. In this case, it's main. In this case, with these curly braces, it's main, and main is always called, so this is always going to execute. But in this case, this is only going to execute if x equals 50. Just like it sounds. If x equals 50, then we'll do this. Cout, say x equals 50. Okay, so here we go. We have our really basic program. It's just going to check if x equals to 50 and print this to the console if it does. And what do you know? It does exactly what we wanted it to, as expected. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what it actually is inside this, because you may be a little bit thrown off by the double equal sign, and the reason for that is there's two different kinds of operators in C++ that use the equal sign. One is the assignment operator, which you're already familiar with. It's the single equal sign, and this is assigning a value to something. So let me just talk about the other one first, and then I'll go through and discuss. The second one is called the comparison operator, and that is the double equals. There are actually more than that for comparison, and we'll talk about those in this tutorial, but for now just know that this is a comparison and this is an assignment. And what I mean by that is, if we assign something in here, say if we don't do double equals, which is a huge mistake. I've made this mistake before myself and had to go through hours of debugging just to realize that my only problem was that I had a single equals instead of a double equals. And the reason that this is an issue is, let's say x is 20. Well, then we say if x equals 50, we execute this. Well, intuitively you'd say, okay, this shouldn't be executed because x doesn't equal 50. But lo and behold, it does equal 50 because we're telling it to equal 50 right here. You don't have to have only equals, or you don't have to have only assignment here or in here. You can have assignment just about anywhere you want to. So let me run this and show you what I mean. Oh, let me get rid of this. There we go. X equals 50 because, well, it does equal 50 because we set it right here. But if we change this to a double equal sign, like it should be, we'll see that it actually doesn't get executed because x equals 20. And this if statement, just a fundamental thing with if statements, is that they run off true or false only. You may remember from last tutorial the Boolean value that we talked about. It can have one of two values, true or false. Those are the only two values a Boolean can have, and an if statement takes a Boolean value. So I can actually just put true in here, and you'll see that this gets executed. Oops. Did that again. you'll see that this gets executed. X equals 50, and that's to be expected because we explicitly told the if statement to run. And if we put false in here, the opposite is true. I'm not going to run that just for time's sake. If you have false in there, it's true. If you have false in there, this won't execute. So, now that we have that in mind, let's talk about the assignment operator, the double equal sign. So what this is saying, when we say x equals 50 with the double equal sign, this is returning a value of true or false. So, if it's 50, this statement will get replaced with true. If it's not 50, which in this case it's not, this is going to get replaced with false. So just in your head, know that this symbol right here will return true or false to whatever you're doing. So it will return true if it's 50, it will return false if it's not. And that's true for any comparison operator. I think I might have said assignment a while ago, and that was a mistake. Sorry about that. This is assignment, this is comparison. But for any comparison operator, it's going to be true or false, and with any if statement, it can only be true or false. It can't be anything else. So, yeah, let's talk about something else now. There's another part of an if statement that you can put on, which is called an else. We'll say if x equals 50, else, we'll give it another block to execute, then we'll say x does not equal to 50. And in this case, it doesn't, so we're going to get this. And this is pretty simple, and I wouldn't make this too complex. It's a lot of words and a lot of symbols, but really in practical terms, we're just saying if the first statement is true, then we're going to do this block. If it's not true, we're going to do this block. And please note that you don't have to have an else statement. You can have as many if statements as you want here, and they'll all get executed individually. If it equals 20, we'll get that. You know, pretty simple. But else, you cannot have an else statement without an if statement because it wouldn't make sense. You can't just say else and not have any kind of statement to base it off of. So we have to say if this is true, if it's not true, else we do this. So with that in mind, I'll introduce you to one last type, pretty simple. It's else if. An else if always attaches to an if statement just like an else, and we can have as many else ifs as we want. And what an else if does is it will only check this value for to be true or false if this one evaluates to false. So if x does not equal 50, well, then we're going to move on to the next one in the chain. So we'll say else if x equals 20. And if it equals 20, then we'll say x equals 20. 20. Okay, so let's run this and see what we get. X equals 20, just as we expected. We say if it equals 50, else if it equals 20, then we'll print this, which in this case it does equal 20. Well, let's see what happens when we put 50. We get x equals 50. And it's really, really important to note that this only happens and this doesn't, because if this is true, this will just get ignored. If this was by itself, it would get checked, but we don't really want that if we're evaluating the same variable, because this variable will not change between these two. So we don't want to waste time in our program evaluating this statement if we don't have to, which is why we put else if. And then also, you can have an else statement down here to do if neither of them is true. I'll just say null. So we'll put this to 25, 23, and we'll see that this gives us null. Okay, now there's one more thing we need to talk about in this video. I know we're going a little bit over time, as I have in most videos, but I want to keep these around 10 minutes. So I'm going to go over this relatively quickly. It's not very hard at all, and it's just the different type of comparison operators. We already know equals equals. Well, just like in math, there's greater than or equal to, and please note that order does matter in these. Order does matter. You can't write equal greater than. This will give you a compiler error. Same thing with less than equal to. And it's exactly what it is. If it's less than or equal to, we get true. If it's not, then we get false. This is kind of a weird one. It's not equal to. And just to note, in any programming language, usually, this is the negation operator, this exclamation point right here. If you put this in front of anything, it will not execute. So in my previous example, I had an if statement that said true. Well, if we put a negation operator in front of this, we're essentially saying if false, because if not true, then what else than false? So if false, we'll do this. False, that says false, not really, but, and think about it, will this execute? We know that it's going to execute if it's true. Oh, sorry, got all these down here. It won't execute because we're telling it not to. We're saying if false. And essentially what this statement says is false. If false, because if not true, then false. And that will work with anything, including equals. So we have, again, equals, greater equals, less equals, not equals. And there's two more, pretty simple, greater than, less than. And those are the assignment operators, not assignment. Assignment is a single equal sign. These are comparison operators that you could need to know. You can use these in any of your if statements. I could say if x is less than 50, we'll execute this. In this case it is. Just to prove to you that I'm not lying, we'll run it. Oh my gosh. And there we go, we get x equals 50, even though it doesn't, but I put x is less than or equal to 50 in here. Okay, that's going to be it for this tutorial. I'm sorry we went a little over time, but this is a very key concept, and I want you to understand it very well. Please leave any questions you have in the comments. I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. Thanks. Bye.